War. As brutal and horrific as it has always been part of us humans and our nature. In this iceberg video, we will look at 8 tiers with more than 44 wars that happened throughout history, and at tier 3, even a war that was over 335 years long. I don't want to waste your time, so let's get right into it. World War II, a global conflict from 1939 to 1945, reshaped the course of history. Triggered by complex political tensions and territorial ambitions, it involved major powers divided into 2 alliances, the Allies and the Axis. The conflict involved continents, with battles fought in Europe, Asia, Africa, and the Pacific. Adolf Hitler's aggressive expansionism, coupled with the invasion of Poland in 1939, caused the war in Europe. The conflict escalated with the invasion of France, the Battle of Britain, and the Holocaust. Simultaneously, in the Pacific, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor in 1941, drawing the United States into the war. World War I, also known as the Great War, ranged from 1914 to 1918 and reshaped history. There were multiple political alliances, so the conflict involved major global powers. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in 1914 acted as a chain reaction of declarations of war. Trench warfare became an important feature of the conflict, as soldiers on the Western Front endured harsh conditions and devastating battles. The Cold War, spanning from the end of World War II in 1945 to the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, was a geopolitical and ideological struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. The term Cold reflects the absence of direct military confrontation, as both superpowers participated in a tense rivalry characterized by nuclear arms race and espionage. Ideologically divided, the U.S. defended democracy and capitalism, while the Soviet Union promoted communism. Key events include the Berlin airlift, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and the Korean and Vietnam Wars. The Cold War's conclusion came with the dissolution of the Soviet Union. The Napoleonic Wars, spanning from 1803 to 1815, were a series of conflicts driven by Napoleon Bonaparte's ambitions for territorial expansion with France. Several European nations formed coalitions to counter his influence. For example, the Third Coalition in 1804, consisting of Britain, Austria, Russia, and others. Notable victories for Napoleon included Austerlitz and Jena Auerstedt, but his Russian campaign in 1812 marked a significant setback. In 1814, coalition forces entered Paris, leading to Napoleon's exile to Elba. His brief return in 1815, known as the 100 Days, peaked in defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. Then he was confined to exile in St. Helena, where he passed away in 1821. The American Civil War took place from 1861 to 1865 and was a conflict between the northern states and the southern states. The main cause was a disagreement over slavery, as the southern states wanted to maintain the institution, while the northern states wanted it abolished. Key battles, such as Gettysburg and Antietam, were fought on American soil, causing significant loss of life. The Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 declared slaves in Confederate states free. The war ended in 1865 with the surrender of the Confederacy. The aftermath led to the Reconstruction era, attempting to rebuild the southern states and address issues of equality. The Crusades were a series of religious wars fought between the 11th and 13th centuries. European Christians, responding to calls from the Pope, took military expeditions to reclaim Jerusalem and other holy sites from Muslim control in the Middle East. The First Crusade, from 1096 to 1099, resulted in the capture of Jerusalem by the Christian forces. More crusades followed, each with varying degrees of success and failure. Notable ones include the Third Crusade, involving figures like Richard the Lionheart and Saladin, and the Fourth Crusade, which unexpectedly diverted to Constantinople, creating tension between Western and Eastern Christians. The Vietnam War, lasting from 1955 to 1975, was a conflict between North Vietnam, supported by Communist allies, and South Vietnam, backed by anti-communist forces, primarily led by the United States. The war evolved from the broader Cold War rivalry between the Communist bloc and the Western world. The United States became deeply involved in preventing the spread of communism in Southeast Asia. However, the conflict faced strong opposition both domestically and internationally. The guerrilla warfare tactics of the North Vietnamese, along with the challenging terrain, made it a long-lasting and difficult conflict. The war created significant anti-war protests, particularly during the 1960s and early 1970s, as well as the controversial use of tactics like chemical warfare. The United States withdrew its forces in 1973, and the war officially ended in 1975 with the fall of Saigon, leading to the reunification of Vietnam under communist control. The French Revolution, spanning from 1789 to 1799, stands as a monumental shift that altered the trajectory of French history. At its core, the revolution was a result of widespread dissatisfaction with the oppressive monarchy, as people wanted to create a society with fairness and equality. The most important moments began in 1789 with the convening of the Estates General, leading to the establishment of the National Assembly and the iconic storming of the Bastille, a symbol of royal tyranny. These events represented the call for liberty, equality, and brotherhood. The Emu War, a chapter in Australian history, occurred in 1932. In Western Australia, farmers were dealing with a large population of emus, flightless birds, causing damage to crops during a drought. Frustrated farmers asked for the government's assistance, leading to the deployment of soldiers armed with machine guns. However, the soldiers' attempt to control the emu population proved to be challenging. The emus were agile and could outrun the military vehicles, making the operation largely ineffective. After a series of unsuccessful attempts, the government eventually abandoned the military approach, and the Emu War became a symbol of both the unique challenges faced by Australian farmers and the unintended humor in attempting to combat a bird population with military force. The Roman conquests, spanning centuries from the Roman Republic to the height of the Roman Empire, were a series of military campaigns that dramatically expanded Roman territories. The conquests began in the 4th century BCE, with Rome gradually asserting dominance over the Italian peninsula. During the Punic Wars in the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE, Rome fought against Carthage, resulting in the acquisition of territories in North Africa, Sicily, and parts of the Iberian Peninsula. Rome then turned its attention to the Eastern Mediterranean, defeating powerful Hellenistic kingdoms such as Macedonia and the Seleucid Empire. By the 1st century BCE, the Roman Republic transformed into the Roman Empire under the leadership of figures like Julius Caesar and Augustus. The empire expanded to include Gaul, modern-day France, Britain, and regions as far as Egypt and Mesopotamia. Now on to Tier 2, starting with the Six-Day War. The Six-Day War, fought from June 5th to June 10th, 1967, was a brief but highly significant conflict in the Middle East. Triggered by regional tensions, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Egypt, quickly gaining control of the Sinai Peninsula. In a series of rapid advances, Israel also seized the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. The outcome of the war had lasting effects. Israel's territorial gains reshaped the landscape, leading to enduring tensions and conflicts in the region. And the displacement of Palestinian populations contributed to the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Franco-Prussian War, which ranged from 1870 to 1871, came from territorial disputes and the Spanish throne succession issue, escalating tensions between France and the German states. A series of Prussian victories, especially the Battle of Sedan in 1870, led to the collapse of the French Second Empire. The war resulted in the establishment of the German Empire in 1871, symbolizing a shift in European power structures. The Treaty of Frankfurt announced the stop of hostilities, with France reluctantly giving up the territory of Alsace and Lorraine to the newly formed German Empire. The Spanish-American Wars of Independence in the early to mid-19th century were a series of conflicts across Latin America as colonies wanted freedom from Spanish rule. Triggered by the power resulting from Napoleon's invasion of Spain in 1808, Latin American leaders, including Miguel Hidalgo in Mexico and Simón Bolívar in South America, led independence movements. These wars, known for their various military strategies, ended in the Battle of Ayacucho in 1824, ending Spanish dominance. The Norman conquests, led by William the Conqueror, began with the decisive Battle of Hastings in 1066. William claimed the English throne, defeating King Harold II. The Domesday Book, a survey commissioned by William, documented land holdings. The 30 Years' War started in 1618 and ended in 1648, originating in religious and political tensions in the Holy Roman Empire. Starting as a rebellion in Bohemia, it evolved into a broader conflict involving major European powers. The Peace of Westphalia in 1648 ended the war, recognizing the independence of the Dutch Republic and Switzerland. The 100 Years' War, which happened from 1337 to 1453, was a long conflict between England and France. Noteworthy engagements, including the Battle of Crécy and the Siege of Orléans led by Joan of Arc, left lasting impacts. The war's conclusion with the Treaty of Paris in 1453 led to territorial shifts, influencing military strategies, shaping national identities, and altering political structures in both nations. The Viking Age, roughly spanning from the late 8th century to the early 11th century, was marked by the Norse seafaring and expansion known as the Viking conquests. Viking expeditions reached as far as North America, the Mediterranean, and the Middle East. Hit-and-run tactics, pillaging, and trading characterized these raids. The Greco-Persian Wars were a series of conflicts between the Persian Empire and Greek city-states in the 5th century BCE. The wars, mainly the First Persian War and the Second Persian War, were sparked by Persian expansion attempts into Greece. The most important events were the Battle of Marathon and the famous Battle of Thermopylae, where a small Greek force, led by King Leonidas I of Sparta, resisted the Persian invasion. The wars ended with the Greek victory at the Battle of Plataea and the naval Battle of Mycale. Caesar's civil war, which ranged from 49 to 45 BCE, was a conflict between Julius Caesar and the Roman Senate, led by Pompey the Great. The power struggle emerged from political tensions and Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon River in defiance of the Senate's orders, leading to the famous phrase, "crossing the Rubicon." Examples of battles are Pharsalus in 48 BCE, where Caesar decisively defeated Pompey. The war concluded with Pompey's death in Egypt, strengthening Caesar's control over Rome. Now on to Tier 3, starting with the Crimean War. The Crimean War was a conflict involving Russia and an alliance of the Ottoman Empire, France, Britain, and Sardinia. It originated from tensions over religious rights in the Holy Land and Russia's expansionist aims in the Black Sea region. Major battles included the Siege of Sevastopol and the Battle of Balaclava. The war saw innovations in military medicine by Florence Nightingale and marked the first extensive use of railways for military transportation. The Treaty of Paris in 1856 ended the war. The War of the League of Cambrai, which began in 1508 and ended in 1516, was a conflict involving an alliance of major European powers, including the Papal States, the Holy Roman Empire, Spain, and the Kingdom of England, formed against the Republic of Venice. The war arose from a complex web of political and territorial disputes. Key battles included the Battle of Agnadello in 1509, where the Venetians suffered a significant defeat. The conflict ended with the Treaty of Brussels in 1516, leading to territorial changes and a temporary realignment of power in Italy. The war refers to a conflict between the Isles of Scilly. The story goes that the war began in 1651 when the Isles of Scilly, mistakenly thinking that the English and Dutch were at war during the First Anglo-Dutch War, declared war on the Netherlands. However, due to a lack of communication and the absence of hostilities, the conflict was never officially ended. Surprisingly, the Isles of Scilly and the Netherlands remained in a state of war on paper for an extended period, 335 years to be exact, until 1986. The oversight was discovered by a local historian, Roy Duncan, who brought it to the attention of the authorities. The two parties then decided to sign a peace treaty in 1986, officially ending what is humorously considered the longest war in history, even though it was largely a bureaucratic oversight and there were no actual hostilities during this prolonged period. The Haitian Revolution was an uprising against French colonial rule in Saint-Domingue, now Haiti. Driven by oppressive conditions and racial injustice, the revolt, led by figures like Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines, culminated in the abolition of slavery and the declaration of Haiti's independence in 1804. The Anglo-Zanzibar War, fought on August 27, 1896, holds the record as the shortest recorded war in history, lasting between 38 and 45 minutes. The conflict arose from the suspicious death of pro-British Sultan Hamad bin Thawani and the contested succession of Sultan Khalid bin Bargash. The British, favoring Hamoud bin Mohammed for his alignment with their interests, considered Khalid's ascension a breach of an 1890 agreement. Issuing an ultimatum, the British gathered a naval force. By 0946, the war ended with minimal British casualties and marked the start of heavy British influence in Zanzibar. The aftermath of World War I witnessed a series of conflicts and geopolitical changes that reshaped the global landscape. Some notable post-World War I conflicts include the Russian Civil War and the Turkish War of Independence. The Russian Civil War was fought between the Red Army and the White Army. This civil war resulted in the establishment of the Soviet Union and the consolidation of Bolshevik power under Vladimir Lenin. The Turkish War of Independence, led by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Turkey fought against Allied occupation forces to establish an independent Turkish state. The war resulted in the Treaty of Lausanne and the founding of the Republic of Turkey. The Wars of Alexander the Great was a series of military campaigns led by Alexander III of Macedon, commonly known as Alexander the Great. Following the assassination of his father, King Philip II of Macedon, Alexander ascended the throne and went on an ambitious conquest that ultimately created one of the largest empires in ancient history. The Boxer Rebellion was an anti-foreign and anti-Christian uprising in China led by the Boxers, a secret society. Fueled by resentment towards foreign influence, economic distress, and discontent with the Qing dynasty, the Boxers targeted foreigners and Chinese Christians. In 1900, they besieged foreign legations in Beijing. A multinational force, including troops from the US, Britain, France, Germany, Japan, and Russia, intervened to protect foreign nationals and their interests. The conflict ended with the suppression of the rebellion, leading to the signing of the Boxer Protocol in 1901. This event weakened the Qing dynasty, contributing to its eventual downfall and the establishment of the Republic of China in 1912. We are already at Tier 4, starting with the 9-Year War. The 9 Years' War, starting in 1688 and ending in 1697, was a global conflict involving European powers. It stemmed from the ambitions of King Louis XIV of France, who sought to expand French territories. The Grand Alliance formed in response included England, the Dutch Republic, Spain, and others. Key battles included the Battle of the Boyne and the Siege of Namur. The war concluded with the Treaty of Ryswick in 1697, which aimed to restore pre-war territorial boundaries. The Castilian Civil War was a conflict for control of the Kingdom of Castile, a part of the larger 100 Years' War between England and France. It pitted Peter of Castile, supported by England, against his half-brother Henry of Trastamara, supported by France. The war's climax was the Battle of Nájera in 1367, resulting in a temporary victory for Peter. However, in 1369, Henry decisively defeated Peter at the Battle of Montiel, securing his position as Henry II of Castile. The Rhodesian Bush War was a conflict in Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, between the white minority government, led by Prime Minister Ian Smith, and various African nationalist groups seeking majority rule. The war involved organizations like the Zimbabwe African National Liberation Army, ZANLA, and the Zimbabwe People's Revolutionary Army, ZIPRA. The Lancaster House Agreement in 1979 paved the way for the establishment of Zimbabwe as an independent nation, with black majority rule. The Romanian Revolution was a series of protests and demonstrations that led to the overthrow of Nicolae Ceausescu's communist regime. The uprising began in the city of Timișoara and quickly spread across the country. Ceausescu's attempt to suppress the revolt failed, and he fled Bucharest. He and his wife were captured, tried, and executed on December 25, 1989. The Hunnic invasions, led by Attila, were a series of military campaigns that significantly impacted the Eastern and Western Roman empires. Attila's forces raided and invaded territories across Europe, putting immense pressure on the Roman Empire. The Huns were eventually defeated at the Battle of the Catalonian Plains in 451, and Attila died under mysterious circumstances in 453. The Hunnic invasions are considered a factor in the decline of the Western Roman Empire. We are already pretty deep now with the War of the Succession of Champagne. The War of the Succession of Champagne came from a dispute over the Champagne region's leadership. In 1190, Count Henry II left for the Crusades, designating his brother Theobald as his heir. After Theobald III's sudden death in 1201, his posthumously born son, Theobald IV, became the focus of contention. In 1215, Philippa of Champagne married Erard of Brienne-Ramarupt, igniting the conflict. Blanche of Navarre, Theobald IV's mother, led a resilient regency. The rebellion by Erard and Philippa prompted foreign intervention, including support from King Philip II and Emperor Frederick II. The War of the Lombards in the Kingdom of Jerusalem and Cyprus was a conflict between Emperor Frederick II's imperialists and the Eastern aristocracy, initially led by the Ibelins and later the Montforts. Triggered by Frederick's bid to influence his son Conrad II's regency, the war witnessed early Lombard victories, notably at Castle Imbert in 1232, but suffered a significant setback at the Battle of Agredi. Shifting allegiances marked the conflict's evolution, culminating in Conrad's declaration of majority. The Ibelins, with Alice's support, claimed triumph after the Siege of Tyre in June 1242. The Hussite Wars were a series of conflicts sparked by followers of Czech reformer Jan Hus, who criticized the Catholic Church. After Hus's execution in 1415, the radical Hussites, particularly the Taborites, initiated the First Hussite War. The Council of Basel failed to resolve tensions, leading to the Second Hussite War, marked by internal strife and external crusades against the Hussites. The wars concluded with the 1436 Compacts of Basel, granting religious freedom to the Hussites and establishing the Utraquist Church. The Uda's revolts, ranging from 601 to 586 BCE, were the kingdom of Judah resisting Neo-Babylonian dominance, resulting in Babylon's victory. King Jehoiakim's refusal to pay taxes led to Nebuchadnezzar's siege of Jerusalem in 597 BCE, capturing the city and exiling thousands. Zedekiah's rebellion in 587 BCE led to another siege, Jerusalem's conquest, and the destruction of Solomon's temple. Zedekiah was captured, his sons executed, and the remaining Jews exiled to Babylonia. Judah ceased to exist in 586 BCE, with Gedaliah, appointed administrator, later murdered in 582. Tier 6. The Fulani Jihads War. The Fulani Jihads were a series of Islamic holy wars, or jihads led by the Fulani people in West Africa during the 18th and 19th centuries. The primary objective was to establish Islamic states and implement Sharia law across various regions. Led by charismatic leaders such as Usman Dan Fodio, the Fulani Jihads resulted in the formation of prominent Fulani states, including the Sokoto Caliphate. Bar Kokhba's revolt, or the Second Jewish-Roman War, marked a major Jewish uprising against the Roman Empire in Judea. Led by Simon Bar Kokhba, the rebellion aimed to establish an independent Jewish state and initially achieved military successes, capturing Jerusalem and establishing a short-lived independent Jewish state. Facing staunch Roman opposition under Emperor Hadrian, led by generals like Julius Severus, the conflict ensued in a protracted struggle. The Romans eventually quelled the revolt in 136 CE, recapturing Jerusalem and causing significant destruction. The aftermath saw severe consequences for the Jewish population, including the suppression of religious and cultural practices and the renaming of Judea to Syria Palestina. The Illyrian Revolt unfolded in the Roman province of Illyricum, comprising the Western Balkans. Fueled by dissatisfaction with Roman rule and taxation, local tribes, led by Bato the Dicitiate, rebelled. Guerrilla tactics led to early successes against Rome. Responding, Governor Publius Quinctilius Varus launched campaigns, resulting in a prolonged conflict with fluctuating fortunes. The Romans, combining military might and diplomacy, ultimately quelled the rebellion. Post-revolt, the region firmly fell under Roman control, with measures implemented to secure authority and deter future uprisings. Now we're almost at the last layer. Here we can only find two wars, the Turkana conflict and the Homo sapiens Neanderthal war. The Turkana conflict primarily refers to the intercommunal conflicts that have occurred in the Turkana region of Kenya. This area has experienced tensions and violence related to competition over resources, including land and water, as well as issues related to cattle rustling. The Turkana people, who are traditionally pastoralists relying on livestock, have sometimes clashed with neighboring communities, such as the Poko and the Toposa, over grazing land and water sources. Additionally, there have been incidents of cattle rustling, which further exacerbate tensions. The interactions between Homo sapiens, modern humans, and Neanderthals, who coexisted in different regions of the world during the Pleistocene epoch, are subjects of scientific investigation. Genetic evidence suggests that there was some interbreeding between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals when they encountered each other. Studies indicate that modern non-African human populations carry a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA, suggesting interbreeding between the two groups. Because there could have been competition for resources, there could have been a lot of conflicts and wars.